Schools teach you how to earn money, but they never teach you how to build wealth. Why do some people stay stuck in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle, while others create lasting financial freedom? What mindset shift separates the poor dad from the rich dad? In this video, I'll break down the most powerful lessons from Rich Dad, Poor Dad and show you how to think differently about money, assets, and financial independence. Ever felt like no matter how hard you work, money seems to slip away? This book explains exactly why and how to turn the game in your favor. By the end, you'll walk away with a new way of looking at money, one that helps you escape the rat race and start building real financial freedom. Picture yourself as a 9-year-old kid in Hawaii during the 1950s. Your best friend is Mike, the son of a wealthy entrepreneur. And you're the son of a highly educated man with a government job. Your real father, whom you'll later call your poor dad. This is where Robert Kiyosaki's story begins in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He grew up with two father figures. One was his biological father, a man with advanced degrees, a secure job, and the belief that the surest path to success was education, good grades, and climbing the ladder of employment. The other was Mike's father, an 8th grade dropout who went on to build a business empire and become one of the richest men in Hawaii. From a very young age, Robert realized that these two men, both intelligent and hardworking, held completely different philosophies about money. And those philosophies shaped his entire financial destiny. His poor dad would say, "Go to school, get a degree, find a safe job, and you'll be set for life." His rich dad would counter, "Don't work for money, make money work for you." Think about that for a second. Which advice do most of us grow up hearing? Study hard, get a good job, save money, buy a house, retire comfortably. That's the standard script society hands us. But Kiyosaki challenges this. He argues that following that script leads not to wealth, but to a cycle of working hard, paying bills, and never truly becoming financially free. Let's bring this into a real-world scenario. Imagine Sarah, a middle-class professional in New York. She went to college, graduated with debt, got a corporate job, and now earns $80,000 a year. She works hard, pays her bills, maybe puts some money into a 401k, and dreams of retirement at 65. From the outside, she looks successful. But if you look deeper, she's stuck in what Kiyosaki calls the rat race. Her income goes straight to expenses: mortgage, car payments, taxes, and maybe a few luxuries. She works for money, but money never works for her. Now contrast that with Mike's father, the rich dad figure. He never finished school, but he understood business. He bought assets that produced cash flow: real estate, small companies, and investments. While Sarah is working 40 hours a week to pay her bills, Rich Dad has money coming in whether he works or not. That's the fundamental difference. Kiyosaki says the turning point in his childhood was when he asked his poor dad, "Dad, how do I get rich?" Poor Dad responded, "Go to school, study hard, and get a good job." But when he asked his rich dad the same question, the answer was different. Rich Dad told him, "Learn how money works. Learn how to make money work for you." That was the spark. At just 9 years old, Robert and his friend Mike asked Rich Dad to teach them how to be rich. Rich Dad didn't hand them a textbook. He didn't tell them to memorize definitions. Instead, he gave them lessons through real-world experiences, almost like apprenticeships. Their education was not about grades. It was about learning how the world of money really operates. One of the earliest lessons was about desire and opportunity. Rich Dad had them work in one of his convenience stores for just 10 cents an hour. Eventually, Robert complained, "This isn't fair. I'm working hard and getting almost nothing." Rich Dad smiled, because that was exactly the point. He wanted Robert to feel the unfairness of working for money. He wanted him to realize that if you rely only on wages, you'll always be at the mercy of someone else's rules. Instead, Rich Dad introduced the idea of looking for opportunities others miss. While working in the store, Robert noticed comic books piling up in the trash. He asked if he could have them, and soon, he and Mike opened a small comic book library, charging neighborhood kids to come in and read as much as they wanted. They turned waste into profit. That tiny experiment planted the seed of entrepreneurship in Robert's mind. It's here that the contrast between the two dads becomes clear. Poor Dad taught Robert that studying hard and landing a job was the path to stability. Rich Dad taught him that thinking differently, spotting opportunities, and building assets was the path to wealth. So, what's the takeaway for us? It's not about having a rich parent or a poor parent. It's about adopting the mindset of Rich Dad. Because most of us are raised with the poor dad philosophy. Focus on job security, climb the ladder, save a little, and hope for the best. But in a world where industries change overnight and job security is an illusion, that advice can leave you vulnerable. Rich Dad's lesson is timeless. If you want true financial freedom, you can't just earn a paycheck. You must learn how to build and acquire assets that generate income, even when you're not working. As Kiyosaki puts it, the poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into what Rich Dad actually meant by making money work for you, and how the secret lies in understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. This one concept, Rich Dad claimed, is the foundation of financial independence. Imagine this. It's Saturday morning in Hawaii. The sun is out, and most kids are out playing. But young Robert and Mike are inside, sitting across from Rich Dad. They've been working in his store, earning just 10 cents an hour. Frustrated, Robert finally explodes. "This isn't fair. I'm working hard and getting nothing for it." Rich Dad leans back, smiles, and replies, "Good. That's exactly how most people feel about money. Now you're ready to learn the real lesson?" Here's the truth that shook Robert as a child, and it might shake you too. The poor and middle class spend their entire lives working for money. They trade hours for dollars, stuck in jobs they may not love, believing security comes from a steady paycheck. But the wealthy? They flip the script. They don't work for money. Money works for them. Think about it. If you ask most people why they work, they'll say it's to pay the bills, to buy food, to cover the mortgage. Fear drives them. The fear of being broke. The fear of not being able to survive. That fear pushes them into jobs they may not enjoy, where they give up their time in exchange for a paycheck. Then, the moment they get paid, desire kicks in. They buy a bigger TV, a nicer car, a new phone. Fear and desire, the two emotions, control their financial lives like invisible puppeteers. Rich Dad explains it this way. Money isn't the problem. It's our emotions around money that trap us. Most people never learn how money actually works because they're too busy letting fear and greed dictate their choices. And so, they stay stuck in what Rich Dad calls the rat race. Picture Susan, a teacher in Chicago. Every 2 weeks, her paycheck arrives. Relief washes over her. Bills can be paid. But almost immediately, she feels the itch of desire. She upgrades her wardrobe, books a vacation, maybe eats out at expensive restaurants. By the time the next paycheck comes, she's back to zero. Then the cycle repeats. Work, fear, paycheck, desire, spending. A hamster wheel that never ends. Now imagine someone who thinks differently. Instead of asking, how can I earn more to cover these bills? They ask, how can I make money work for me so I don't have to rely on a paycheck? That one shift in mindset is the dividing line between the wealthy and everyone else. Robert, as a boy, learned this lesson the hard way. After weeks of working for almost nothing, he realized something. No matter how hard he worked, he would never get ahead by wages alone. Rich Dad wanted him to feel that frustration deeply, so he'd understand that chasing paychecks wasn't the answer. Instead, Rich Dad told him, the secret is learning how to spot opportunities, to invest in assets, and to build systems where money generates more money. The rich focus on acquiring assets, things that put money into their pockets, while the poor and middle class focus on working for wages and buying liabilities, things that take money out. Here's a modern example. Take Mark, who works in San Francisco. He earns $120,000 a year as a software engineer, a great salary. But he spends nearly all of it on a big mortgage, student loans, car payments, and lifestyle expenses. On paper, he's successful. But financially, he's one bad layoff away from disaster. Now consider Emily, who also earns $120,000. Instead of buying a bigger house or a luxury car, she lives modestly and invests in rental properties. Each property produces monthly cash flow. Within 5 years, she has enough passive income to cover her living expenses. At that point, she doesn't need her job. She chooses it. That's the freedom Rich Dad was teaching. And here's the golden nugget of this chapter. The rich don't get rich by working harder. They get rich by working smarter, by understanding money, by managing emotions, and by turning opportunities into income streams. Rich Dad drilled this lesson into Robert. If you don't learn how money works, you'll spend your life working for it. It's a mindset shift. Most people ask, how can I afford this? The rich ask, how can I create an opportunity to pay for this? One question shuts the brain down. The other sparks creativity. So, what does this mean for us, listening today? It means if you're working for money and nothing else, you'll always be at the mercy of your employer, the economy, or circumstances beyond your control. But if you learn to master money, if you learn to make it your servant instead of your master, you begin to break free from the rat race. This is why Rich Dad often said, opportunities are everywhere, but only those prepared to see them will take advantage. In the next chapter, we'll explore the single most powerful tool the rich use to escape the rat race, understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Once you grasp this, you'll see money in an entirely new way. Let's pause for a moment and ask a simple question. Why is it that so many people, even those with great jobs, advanced degrees, and impressive salaries, often struggle financially? Why do doctors, lawyers, and even executives sometimes end up broke or stressed about money? Robert Kiyosaki's answer is clear. Because most people were never taught financial literacy. We learn algebra, history, and grammar in school. But money, the thing we'll all use every single day of our lives, is rarely part of the curriculum. And so, people grow up financially illiterate, unable to tell the difference between what builds wealth and what drains it. Rich Dad would put it bluntly. It's not how much money you make. It's how much money you keep. and how hard it works for you. This is where Rich Dad introduced the most important lesson in the entire book: the difference between assets and liabilities. On the surface, it sounds simple, but Kiyosaki argues that this single concept is the foundation of financial independence. Here's how Rich Dad defined it. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. Forget complicated jargon. Forget Wall Street terms. If it adds to your income, it's an asset. If it drains your income, it's a liability. Let's take a real-world example. In the United States, people often believe their home is their greatest asset. They work hard, save for a down payment, and proudly announce, "I own a house. This is my biggest investment." But according to Rich Dad, that's not entirely true. Why? Because a house doesn't usually put money into your pocket. Instead, it takes money out. Mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance, insurance. Month after month, money leaves your pocket. That makes it, in practice, a liability. Now, compare that to a rental property. Suppose you buy a small apartment in Dallas, and after covering expenses, you earn $400 each month in positive cash flow. That property is an asset because it puts money into your pocket consistently. This distinction may sound simple, but it's a game changer. The poor and middle class often acquire liabilities that they think are assets. They buy bigger houses, new cars, boats, and other things that drain their cash flow. The rich, on the other hand, focus on acquiring true assets: businesses, investments, real estate, intellectual property, things that keep producing income whether they're working or not. Robert remembers his poor dad believing in the traditional formula: work hard, get a high-paying job, buy a house, and climb the ladder of success. But Rich Dad flipped the script. The secret is not working harder. The secret is learning how to acquire assets and minimize liabilities. Think of it this way. Imagine two friends, Tom and David. Tom earns $70,000 a year. He buys a new car with monthly payments of $600, takes on a bigger mortgage, and spends weekends shopping for the latest gadgets. His balance sheet is full of liabilities, things that drain his income. David also earns $70,000, but he lives modestly. Instead of upgrading his lifestyle, he invests in dividend-paying stocks, small rental properties, and builds a side business online. Within a few years, David's assets generate enough cash flow that he could quit his job if he wanted. Same income, but entirely different outcomes. That's financial literacy in action. Rich Dad also stressed the importance of keeping personal financial statements, something most people never do. He taught Robert to draw a simple diagram. On one side, income and expenses. On the other, assets and liabilities. The poor and middle class often have expenses that rise as their income rises, meaning they never escape the rat race. The rich, however, funnel income into acquiring assets, which then produce more income, creating a positive feedback loop. Here's the kicker. You don't have to be born wealthy to start building assets. In fact, most wealthy people in America today weren't born rich. They learned financial literacy. They understood the difference between assets and liabilities, and they used that knowledge to escape the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Robert puts it plainly. The single biggest difference between a rich person and a poor person is what they do in their spare time. The rich invest in assets. The poor buy liabilities they think are assets. So, if you want financial independence, you must ask yourself, Am I building assets or stacking liabilities? Every decision you make with money pushes you in one direction or the other. In the next chapter, we'll see how Rich Dad expanded this lesson, teaching Robert the importance of mindset and entrepreneurship, and why working for security can be more dangerous than working for freedom. When most people hear the phrase, "mind your own business," they think it means staying out of other people's affairs. But for Rich Dad, it meant something very different. It meant that if you want to be wealthy, you have to focus on building your own business and assets, not just working for someone else's. Robert recalls how his poor dad always emphasized the importance of job security. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, climb the ladder. It was a path built on the belief that a paycheck is the ultimate reward. But Rich Dad disagreed. When you work for someone else, he said, you're building their business, not yours. Think about that for a moment. Every time you show up to work, no matter how hard you work, the profits, the growth, the real wealth are going into someone else's pocket. You're helping your employer grow richer while you remain dependent on the paycheck. Rich Dad taught that the wealthy always mind their own business. Even if they have jobs, they don't rely solely on them. They use their income to build their asset columns, to buy real estate, stocks, bonds, intellectual property, or even small businesses. Over time, their assets start producing enough income that they no longer depend on wages. That's the ultimate freedom. Take a real-world example. Karen is a nurse in Boston. She works hard, earns a stable salary, and spends most of her income covering expenses. She's dedicated, but at the end of each month, there's little left over. Now compare her to John, also a nurse, who takes a different approach. John uses part of his salary to buy dividend-paying stocks and eventually invests in a small clinic with 2 partners. Over a decade, John's assets begin producing more income than his nursing job. While Karen's financial future relies on her next paycheck, John's future is fueled by the assets he built. That's the difference between working in someone else's business and minding your own. Rich Dad would often remind Robert and Mike, the rich focus on their asset columns while everyone else focuses on their income statements. The poor and middle class focus on increasing their wages, hoping promotions or raises will solve their problems. But even when income rises, so do expenses. Bigger houses, newer cars, fancier vacations. And so, the rat race continues. The rich, however, funnel surplus income into acquiring more assets. Their assets become their real business. Their jobs may pay the bills, but their true focus is on growing streams of income that don't rely on their daily labor. Robert recalls how Rich Dad would show him ledgers of his businesses. He didn't just rely on his convenience stores. He owned warehouses, real estate, and stocks. Each asset worked quietly in the background, producing cash flow. "These are my real businesses," Rich Dad said. "My stores just cover expenses. My assets make me wealthy." So what does minding your own business look like in practical terms? It doesn't necessarily mean quitting your job tomorrow. It means while you're working, you're also building. It means you see your salary not as the end, but as fuel for creating assets. Instead of asking, "How do I get a raise?" ask, "How do I use this paycheck to buy something that will pay me forever?" This is why so many entrepreneurs and investors stress the importance of side hustles, small investments, and long-term planning. The wealthy treat their personal financial lives as businesses, with income, expenses, assets, and liabilities carefully tracked. And here's the beautiful irony. Once you start minding your own business, your financial future no longer depends on the decisions of your boss, your company, or even the economy. You become your own source of security. As Rich Dad would put it, financial struggle comes from working all your life for someone else. So, the question is, are you building your employer's wealth, or are you building your own? In the next chapter, we'll explore the power of corporations, how the rich legally use business structures to protect their wealth and pay fewer taxes, while the poor and middle class often carry the heaviest burden. Imagine this. It's April in the United States. Tax season. Millions of people are sitting at their kitchen tables with calculators, receipts, and forms, sighing as they realize how much of their hard-earned income will be taken away. For most people, taxes feel like a burden they simply can't escape. But Rich Dad revealed something Robert never forgot. While the poor and middle class work hard to pay taxes, the rich have learned how to use the system to their advantage. To understand this lesson, Rich Dad first explained the history of taxes. In America, taxes were originally introduced as a temporary measure. During times of war, governments needed money, so they taxed the rich. The promise was always the same. This is only for now, and only for the wealthy. But once taxes became law, they didn't go away. Instead, they spread. Over time, the middle class bore most of the tax burden, while the rich found ways to protect themselves. How did they do it? Through the power of corporations. A corporation, Rich Dad explained, is simply a legal entity that you can use to separate your personal income from your business income. And here's the key difference. Employees earn, get taxed, and then spend what's left. Corporations earn, spend, and then get taxed on what remains. Let's make that real with an example. Take Sarah, a marketing manager in Chicago. She earns $100,000 a year. Before she spends a dime, taxes take about 30%. That leaves her with $70,000 to cover her mortgage, groceries, car payments, and lifestyle. Now look at David, who owns a small marketing firm set up as a corporation. His business earns $100,000. But instead of paying taxes first, David uses pre-tax dollars to cover expenses. His car lease, travel for business, even part of his home office. After expenses, he's left with, say, $60,000, and only then does he pay taxes. His real, spendable money goes further because he used the corporation as a shield. Rich Dad would often remind Robert, the rich don't play the game harder, they play it smarter. Corporations give the wealthy control and flexibility. They protect personal assets from lawsuits. They allow for business expenses to be written off, and they enable tax advantages that employees simply don't get. Of course, this doesn't mean corporations are magic tricks. They require knowledge, strategy, and legal compliance. But Rich Dad's point was clear. The rules of money are not taught in school. They are learned by those who seek them. The poor and middle class often complain about taxes, but the wealthy quietly use the system to their advantage. Consider this. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, has often remarked that his effective tax rate is lower than his secretary's. That's not because he's breaking the law. It's because he understands the rules of the game, rules built around investing and business ownership. Robert's poor dad would get frustrated by this, insisting that people should just pay their fair share. But Rich Dad countered, taxes are your single biggest expense. If you don't learn how to minimize them legally, you'll spend your life working for the government. This chapter is about more than taxes. It's about financial intelligence. The rich take the time to understand the laws, the structures, and the opportunities that exist. They use corporations, trusts, and investments to build and protect wealth. The poor and middle class rely on jobs, where taxes are automatically deducted before they even see their money. So here's the question. Are you playing the game of money with the rules stacked against you? Or are you willing to learn the strategies that the wealthy use every day? Rich Dad put it simply. Employees work hard so the government and banks get paid first. The rich create corporations so they get paid first. In the next chapter, we'll see how Rich Dad emphasized the importance of financial education and why learning about money is far more valuable than simply earning it. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to find opportunities everywhere, while others can't catch a break no matter how hard they work? Rich Dad explained this to Robert with a simple truth. Wealth isn't about luck. It's about knowledge, creativity, and the ability to spot opportunities where others see problems. In other words, the rich invent money. Robert remembers his poor dad saying things like, "I can't afford that," whenever faced with a challenge. It was a dead-end statement. But Rich Dad flipped that phrase around. He said, "Don't say, 'I can't afford it.' Ask instead, 'How can I afford it?'" That tiny shift opens the mind to possibilities. The poor shut doors by believing money controls them. The rich open doors by believing they can control money. Let's bring this to life with a story. Imagine two friends, Emma and Jason. They both notice a run-down duplex for sale in a small town outside Dallas. Emma says, "I can't afford that. It looks risky." Jason says, "How can I make this work?" He crunches the numbers, talks to a local bank, and finds out he can finance the purchase with a small down payment. He rents one unit to cover the mortgage and lives in the other. Within 2 years, he refinances, buys another property, and now he has 2 assets generating cash flow. Same property, different mindset. Jason saw an opportunity. Emma only saw a problem. That's what Rich Dad meant when he said the rich invent money. They use financial knowledge, creativity, and courage to turn opportunities into income. Robert recalls Rich Dad comparing opportunities to buses. There's always another one coming. The question is, are you prepared to hop on? For most people, opportunities pass right in front of them, but because they lack financial literacy, they don't recognize them. To the untrained eye, a stock market crash looks terrifying. To the financially educated, it looks like a clearance sale. Take the 2008 financial crisis in the US. While millions were panicking, some investors were quietly buying undervalued real estate, stocks, and businesses. 10 years later, many of those same investors had multiplied their wealth many times over. The difference wasn't luck. It was preparation meeting opportunity. Rich Dad stressed that risks will always be there. But the rich don't fear risk. They manage it. They learn the rules, study the market, and position themselves to win. Poor Dad avoided risk by playing it safe. Rich Dad embraced risk by getting smarter. Here's another example. Suppose you have $10,000. Most people might put it into a savings account, earning less than 1% interest. The wealthy, however, might use that $10,000 as a down payment on a small rental property, or as seed capital for a side business, or even to buy shares in a growing company. The money starts working, multiplying, creating more opportunities. That's the difference between parking money and inventing money. But this chapter isn't just about investments. It's about mindset. The rich believe in possibilities. They train their minds to look for angles, to find ways forward, to play the game differently. Robert learned that the greatest asset you can build is not real estate, not stocks, not even a business. The greatest asset is your mind. With the right knowledge, you can turn every obstacle into an opening. Rich Dad summed it up beautifully. Money is not real. It's just an agreement. The more you learn how it works, the more you can create it. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I can't do it," or "I can't afford it," stop. Replace it with, "How can I?" That single question is what separates those who wait for luck from those who invent their own luck. In the next chapter, we'll discover why the need to work to learn, not just to earn, is one of the most overlooked keys to building true wealth. Most people take jobs for one simple reason: money. They want a paycheck. They want security. But Rich Dad taught Robert a very different lesson. Don't work for money. Work to learn. Poor Dad believed the traditional path was the safest. Specialize in one field, get a degree, and build a long career. Be a teacher, a doctor, an engineer, and climb the ladder in that one area. But Rich Dad saw the world differently. He believed that in order to become rich, you need to be versatile. You need to understand how money works, how people work, and how systems work. The best education, he said, doesn't always come from school. It comes from experience. Rich Dad encouraged Robert and Mike to take jobs not just for income, but for the lessons they offered. Sales jobs, for example, might not pay much at first, but they teach communication, persuasion, and the ability to handle rejection. Running a small business might be stressful, but it teaches management, leadership, and problem solving. Even working in accounting, marketing, or operations for a short time can give you tools that will serve you for life. Robert shares that he once worked for free for Rich Dad, cleaning stores and learning how the businesses ran. Poor Dad thought it was exploitation. Rich Dad, however, knew that the real payment was the education. Don't think about how much you're earning, he said. Think about what you're learning. Here's a modern example. Imagine a young graduate named Lisa. She lands an entry-level corporate job that pays well, but her growth is limited. She's just a tiny cog in a giant wheel. Her friend Marco, on the other hand, takes a lower-paying job at a startup, where he's exposed to marketing, finance, customer service, and operations. After 3 years, Lisa is still on the corporate ladder, while Marco has the skills to launch his own business. Who really came out ahead? The truth is, the world rewards problem solvers. If you only know how to do one thing, your options are limited. But if you've trained across multiple areas, finance, sales, investing, leadership, you can adapt, you can create, and you can spot opportunities others miss. Rich Dad put it this way: the rich know a little about a lot, while the poor know a lot about a little. This doesn't mean you shouldn't master something. It means you should also broaden your skill set. The more perspectives you have, the more tools you bring to the game of money. Robert even points out that fear is often what holds people back. Many refuse to take jobs outside their comfort zone because they're afraid of failing. But every failure teaches something invaluable. Rich Dad said, "The more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more you earn." So if you're working only for money, you'll likely stay trapped in the rat race. But if you're working to learn, every job becomes an investment in your financial future. You're no longer just an employee. You're a student of life, gathering the knowledge that will one day allow you to step out of the rat race altogether. The key question isn't how much am I making, but what am I learning here that will help me build my own path? As Rich Dad often reminded Robert, job security doesn't make you rich. Skills do. In the next chapter, we'll look at the obstacles people face on their journey to wealth: fear, cynicism, laziness, arrogance, and bad habits, and how to overcome them. By this point, Robert had learned from Rich Dad that money isn't just about working harder. It's about thinking differently, acquiring financial education, and spotting opportunities. But even with all this knowledge, most people still never become rich. Why? Because of obstacles. Rich Dad identified 5 main obstacles: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Each one has the power to quietly steal your financial future if you let it. Let's start with fear. For most people, the biggest fear is losing money. It's natural. Nobody likes to fail. Nobody likes to see their savings shrink. But Rich Dad made an important distinction. The rich aren't fearless. They simply manage fear differently. When the poor and middle class face the risk of loss, they freeze or run. When the rich face the same risk, they analyze, learn, and move forward anyway. Think of it like investing in the stock market. If prices drop suddenly, the average investor panics and sells, locking in their loss. The wealthy investor studies the situation, looks at the fundamentals, and often buys more at the lower price. Same event, 2 very different outcomes. Fear itself isn't the enemy. It's how you respond to it. Next comes cynicism. This is the voice in your head, or sometimes the voices around you, that whisper, "It won't work. It's too risky. You'll lose everything." Robert remembered how Poor Dad would constantly say, "Be careful. That's too risky." Cynicism keeps people from even trying. But Rich Dad would say, "If you let doubt rule your decisions, you'll never see the opportunities right in front of you." Every successful investor, entrepreneur, or creator has faced critics. The question is whether you listen to them or push forward. The third obstacle is laziness. Now, this might surprise you. Most people don't think of themselves as lazy. But Rich Dad explained that laziness often disguises itself as busyness. People fill their days with endless tasks, chores, and work to avoid confronting the bigger challenge of building wealth. They say, "I don't have time," when really, it's about priorities. The rich prioritize creating assets and building financial intelligence. The poor and middle class often prioritize comfort. Then we have bad habits. Robert noticed how Poor Dad had a habit of paying everyone else first: the government, the landlord, the bills, and if anything was left over, he saved. Rich Dad did the opposite. He paid himself first. That meant he set aside money for investing and asset building before paying bills. If money ran short, it forced him to get creative, to make more, to find new ways to generate cash flow. That habit alone separated the rich from everyone else. Finally, there's arrogance. Rich Dad defined arrogance as ignorance plus ego. It's when people don't know something but refuse to admit it. For example, someone might say, "Real estate is too risky," not because they've studied it, but because they're unwilling to learn. Arrogance closes the door on knowledge. And when you stop learning, you stop growing. Think about it. How many times in your life have you let one of these obstacles hold you back? Did fear keep you from investing? Did cynicism make you ignore an opportunity? Did laziness lead you to put off building assets? Did bad habits drain your money before you could save? Did arrogance stop you from asking questions? Rich Dad told Robert, "You can have all the money in the world pass through your hands, But if you don't master your fears, doubts, laziness, and habits, it will always slip away. Overcoming obstacles is not about eliminating them. They'll always be there. It's about recognizing them and training your mind to choose courage, curiosity, discipline, and humility instead. As Rich Dad put it, winners are not afraid of losing, but losers are. Failure is part of success. People who avoid failure also avoid success. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the rich find new ways to get started, even when they don't have money, knowledge, or perfect timing. By now, Robert had absorbed Rich Dad's lessons on assets, liabilities, the rat race, and even how to overcome obstacles like fear and cynicism. But there was still one burning question left. Okay, Rich Dad, how do I actually get started? Rich Dad smiled. Getting started, he explained, isn't about having money. It's about having the right mindset and taking action, even if it's small. Most people never begin their wealth-building journey because they're waiting. They wait for the right time, the right job, the right investment, the right amount of savings. But the truth is, there is never a perfect time. Waiting is just another form of fear. Rich Dad gave Robert some guiding principles. The first was simple but powerful. Decide to be rich. That decision is the starting point. Without it, you'll always drift back to the rat race. He explained that the poor and middle class often don't make a firm decision. They just hope things will get better. The rich, on the other hand, commit to building wealth no matter what. The second principle was to pay yourself first. This doesn't mean buying luxuries before paying bills. It means setting aside money for assets before anything else. Even if it's just a small amount, it's a signal to yourself that your financial growth is the priority. The bills will pressure you to earn more, but the habit of saving and investing will make sure your money starts working for you. Then came a lesson about choosing your heroes and teachers wisely. Robert learned that if you want to be rich, study the rich. Watch what they do. Learn from their successes and failures. Poor Dad had believed in traditional schooling. Rich Dad believed in lifelong learning, seminars, books, mentors, conversations, and most importantly, real-world experience. Here's a modern example. Imagine Anna, who wants to start investing but doesn't know where to begin. Instead of waiting until she has the perfect amount saved, she opens a brokerage account and buys a single share of an index fund. It's not about the amount. It's about starting. That one small action changes her identity. She's no longer just a saver. She's an investor. From there, her confidence and knowledge grow. Rich Dad also stressed the importance of giving. He believed that generosity attracts abundance. When you give, whether it's money, time, or knowledge, you create a flow that comes back to you in unexpected ways. Many of the wealthiest people in the world are also the biggest philanthropists. Giving isn't just charity, it's a mindset of abundance. Robert also recalls Rich Dad warning him not to get trapped in the comparison game. Too many people look at others' wealth, feel discouraged, and give up before they start. Rich Dad reminded him, run your own race. Wealth is a marathon, not a sprint. Perhaps the most practical advice Rich Dad gave about getting started was this: start small, but start now. Buy a single stock, invest in a small rental property, or even launch a side hustle. The lessons you learn from these first steps will be worth more than any classroom lecture. He explained that money is like a muscle. If you never use it, it stays weak. If you start training, even with light weights, it grows stronger and more capable. The rich aren't born rich. They build wealth by starting, learning, adjusting, and continuing. Rich Dad ended the lesson with words Robert never forgot. You'll never know everything before you start. The point is to start anyway. Action always beats inaction. In the final chapter, we'll look at the 10 steps Rich Dad shares for awakening your financial genius, tying everything together into a practical path forward. If you're still enjoying this video, don't forget to give it a like and let us know in the comments which chapter you found the most insightful or packed with learning. After years of learning from Rich Dad, Robert realized that becoming rich wasn't about luck or even just intelligence. It was about mindset, habits, and discipline. But for those who still wanted to go further, Rich Dad laid out practical steps. 10 powerful ways to awaken your financial genius. The first step was about desire. You have to want it badly enough. Not just the cars, the houses, or the vacations, but the freedom. The freedom to choose how to spend your time. The freedom to live on your own terms. Rich Dad believed this burning desire was the engine that powered everything else. Without it, most people give up when the journey gets hard. Next came the importance of choosing daily. Every day you make decisions to spend or save, to invest or waste, to learn or remain ignorant. Your daily choices stack up to become your financial destiny. Poor Dad often complained about his situation. Rich Dad taught Robert to take responsibility for every choice, no matter how small. The third principle was to master learning quickly. In a world that changes fast, the ability to adapt and learn new skills is priceless. The rich don't cling to the past, they evolve. Whether it's learning about new markets, new technologies, or new opportunities, they stay ahead by staying curious. Then came the power of self-discipline. Rich Dad always said, if you can't control yourself, you can't control your money. Discipline means sticking to your plan, even when temptations appear. It means investing before you splurge. It means paying yourself first, no matter what. Another key step was to choose your friends wisely. If you surround yourself with people who complain, fear, or make excuses, their mindset will rub off on you. But if you surround yourself with people who dream big, invest smart, and push themselves, their habits will lift you higher. Rich Dad also talked about the gift of giving. He believed that generosity opened doors to more opportunities. When you give your knowledge, your time, or even your money, you attract abundance. It's no accident that some of the richest people in the world are also the biggest givers. Robert remembered another powerful lesson. Focus on opportunities, not obstacles. Most people only see risks. The rich train themselves to see possibilities, even in downturns. In fact, some of the greatest fortunes in history were made during recessions. While others were running scared, the rich were buying assets on sale. Rich Dad also emphasized the importance of teachers. He said, find someone who has done what you want to do. Learn from them. Pay for their time if you must. A good mentor can save you years of trial and error. And then there was faith in yourself. Many people wait for others to believe in them. But Rich Dad taught Robert to believe in himself first. When you trust your vision, you'll take steps others are too afraid to take. Finally, the last step was to just start. Don't wait until you know everything. Don't wait until the timing is perfect. Don't wait until you're ready. The rich aren't people who had all the answers from the beginning. They're people who dared to begin and learned along the way. Robert closed his lessons with this realization. Poor Dad had always sought security and ended up with a safe but limited life. Rich Dad had sought freedom and ended up building wealth not only for himself, but for generations. The difference wasn't education or intelligence. It was philosophy. It was mindset. It was action. And so the question becomes, what about you? Will you follow the path of poor dad, working hard for money and security, always playing it safe? Or will you follow the path of rich dad, building assets, learning constantly, and creating freedom? The choice, as Rich Dad would say, is always yours. A book that reminds us wealth is not about luck or degrees. It's about mindset, discipline, and action. But here's the thing, knowing what to do is only half the journey. The real question is, how do you build the unshakable belief, the burning desire, and the psychological strength to actually make it happen? To understand why some people turn ordinary ideas into massive fortunes, while others never move beyond dreaming, click on the video popping up on the screen.